All right, welcome back to the Long View, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you, Charlie Sykes. To the contrary, thanks for joining as always.
Good to be with you.
So Charlie, I wanted to ask. I saw you wrote in one of your Substacks about the Epstein Files, and it's for me interesting. So many controversial issues have emerged: tariff, Medicaid, Ukraine. But the Epstein file seemed to be the one causing problems in MAGA world. Um, First, for people who don't know, what are they, and why are they creating rifts within the GOP?
Well, it's hard to overstate how obsessed right wing media has been with the whole story of Jeffrey Epstein and the sex trafficking allegations against him. I mean, they're more than allegations. I mean, he was in jail. His associates have gone to jail, and this has been an obsession with folks on the not just the far right, but I think throughout MAGA, because I think that this tied into conspiracy theories that there were Democrats involved in this sex trafficking of young girls. I think there was a lot of focus on Bill Clinton. One of the strange bits of cognitive dissonance has always been the fact that Donald Trump clearly hung around with Jeffrey Epstein a lot. There are a lot of photos about it. There's a long paper trail. And yet, for some reason, MAGA became obsessed with finding out what was the secrets. And I think that they built this up that this was going to be the dagger for the deep state. It would confirm everything that you thought. And so they have been playing this card for years. It escalated with Trump's election up until like about 5 minutes ago. They were promising, they were pledging, they were going to release it. Pam Bondi said that there were these thousands of files on her desk right now. They staged this weird photo op, which you'll remember, where they brought some of these right wing influencers, to the White House, and they handed out these binders. This was it, the Epstein files. We were going to open it up, and all of the secrets of the deep state would be there. And it turned out there was nothing there; it was just redacted. So again, the drumbeat continued. Pam Bondi kept saying that she had seen all of these photos, and let's be honest about it. There is a lot there somewhere, and then the next stage would be when the Trump Elon Musk breakup occurred. Elon Musk's big bomb was Donald Trump is in those Epstein files. So we kind of were wondering, mark this, what's going to happen. So when they announced this week, basically, there's nothing to see, no charges, there's no client list, no blackmailing, and Jeffrey Epstein absolutely committed suicide. They were trying to basically do a 180 turn on something that they had been pumping up for years. So not a surprise that there'd be this kind of disillusion and backlash.
And what does it say either about the conservative media or conservatism that this is the issue that does have such resonance, that does cause a backlash? Kind of, how does that fit in what you've talked and written about of where conservatism has moved?
Well, I heard somebody do a riff. I'm trying to remember. It was really well done, saying, it wasn't this, it wasn't this, it wasn't, the Gulags, the alligator Alcatraz, it wasn't the renditioning of prisoners, it wasn't the massive deficits, it wasn't the violation of the rules of law, the rule of law, none of those things. And it's because basically, the conservative media obsesses about a few things, and many of them are, I would say, contingent. I mean, they're willing to surrender the principle. They're willing to reverse. This one feels a little bit different because this was sort of self-generated from within MAGA. It predates Donald Trump. It's not totally about Donald Trump. I have to say, though, I am struck by the degree of disappointment and disillusionment because I mean, part of it is like, guys, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, seriously. I mean, really, what were you thinking? All you need to do is Google, images Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump bragged about going to the party. He said, Jeffrey Epstein's a great guy, and we share this fascination with beautiful women. I mean, this goes back a long way. So, what was MAGA actually expecting? I guess this is part of this weird double think on the right that went from character matters to character doesn't matter at all if it's Donald Trump. The moment that they decided they didn't care about Donald Trump saying, when you're a celebrity, you can grab women by that, what. The moment that they decided that allegations of rape just didn't matter, what did they expect was going to happen with the Epstein files? So there's a certain amount of karma at work here, big time karma. And I suppose this is the final fallout or one of the final fallouts. It's not the final, it's the biggest fallout so far from the Elon Musk bromance breakup.
And the last question on this, do you think this will be an enduring problem, or will it be like so many things, just a few days at most before everyone moves on?
Well, that's a great question because literally, how many times have we had this discussion? Is this going to be it? And it never is. And this probably won't be. But among the influencers, I mean, it plants a seed of doubt. I assume that we're going to move past it. On the other hand, the reality is there is something there. I mean, this is one of those weird moments where the MAGA folks who are saying that wait, there has to be all of these tapes and these files and these names, they're not wrong about that. Tina Brown has a pretty good piece where she talks about this. We know that there are these flight logs out there, so there's always the potential that there's something out there. But look, you and I have been doing this now for what, 10 years? Nothing seems to matter. I doubt this was going to break. Look, when you elect a convicted felon to be president of the United States who has been found liable for sexual abuse by a federal court, whose record with women is not a state secret, I don't think that this is going to be the breaking point. Although it is awfully interesting listening to some of these very high profile right wing influencers, how thoroughly pissed off they are about this. And they are, at least for now, at least for today, Friday, July 11th, 2025.
You think, just to add to that, I saw a clip of Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
who was speaking pretty negatively about the deportation program. Do you think there's anything brewing there in conservative media and podcasting?
Well, Joe Rogan is sort of his own universe, right? I mean, there's the hardcore right wing, fever swamps. There's the Charlie Kirks out there. There's the Steve Bannons. Then there's the Joe Rogan, who I think both parties recognize has an unusual audience. That he's reached out to people who are not necessarily core MAGA, but maybe MAGA adjacent or MAGA curious. And when he says things like, "Wait, I didn't sign up for this," that probably is more significant than some of the other influencers there. So yes, and I've been thinking for some time that it's going to be these stories, it's going to be these images that will make a difference. That is going to erode. And again, not necessarily hardcore MAGA types, but the people who were in a respectable suburb of MAGA, whatever, who are seeing this and going, look, I want stronger borders, which is legitimate. I think that we ought to deport criminals, which is legitimate. And now, when they're seeing the pictures of the grandmas being snatched off the streets or the masked, the militarization, that runs against certain fundamental American values, which are still. I mean, we've seen so many of them eroded, haven't we? But there's a residual sense of decency and due process and respect for these things that's being violated. So that feels like a drip, drip, drip.
And there's also just, even in social circles, you keep hearing more stories of someone who knows someone. And I think politically that actually matters. The other is, look, Republicans have been battling between fiscal conservatism and tax cuts since the 80s. Reagan passed his tax cut in 1981. And you saw kind of an erosion of balancing the budget and fighting the debt as a central issue. But this bill is such a dramatic budget buster, in terms of what it's going to do to the debt. Do you think, I mean, how do you read that? Is that just one more part of this story, or is this a real turning point where those concerns just are not important Republican politics anymore.
Well, you take the long view, so you know that if there was a turning point, the turning point happened a long time ago. I think there's been this talk about fiscal conservatism that has been more symbolic for many years now. I mean, you go back to the Reagan years. If there was a fight between fiscal conservatives and the tax cutters, it was lost long ago by the fiscal conservatives. I do think that this felt like an extinction level event for fiscal conservatives. I mean, how many votes were they able to muster? What kind of resistance did you get from the Freedom Caucus? Even Elon Musk intervening. What he got? What one vote
Yeah.
in the House of Representatives? So really, it no longer exists as a political force within the Republican Party. I mean, I think that's been true for a long time, but I think it's just absolutely undeniable now.
And do you think Republicans are harsher today? I mean, there was a lot of discussion with the cuts, the food stamps and Medicaid, including to their own constituencies, what this is going to do. I mean, do you think that generationally may be getting worse than it had been before?
Well, there's some queasiness about this. I mean, you're still seeing some queasiness about the Medicaid cuts, and you'll notice that how many Republicans are stressed, like Josh Hawley, for example, are stressing the fact that those Medicaid cuts do not take place really until after the midterm elections. I mean, they recognize that they didn't want to necessarily run on that. But you mentioned the harshness. There was that era of the kinder, gentler conservatism. There
Compassionate.
appears to be compassionate, yes, more compassionate conservatism. No interest in that anymore. In fact, what's really kind of striking is the performative, sort of the glee over cutting some of these benefits, or things like the alligator Alcatraz. And I did a podcast with Ann Applebaum earlier this week.
Uh-huh.
I don't know whether people, and I asked her at some point, because she has tracked authoritarianism and the patterns, and so much of what's happening now seems to be from that authoritarian playbook, right? And I said, well, what about this performative cruelty, this sort of the glee about the brutality of, say, these gulags, the fact that there are mosquitoes and it's hell on earth and everything. Does that numbing of people to to cruelty? And I said, does that sound familiar to you? And she said, well, no, actually, you think about it, the Soviet gulags were a big secret. They did not sell merch. There were no T-shirts about the gulag. The death camps were also kept very quiet. They didn't talk about them. People may have known about them, they may have suspected them, but it was not something that was advertised or celebrated on whatever the equivalent of social media. So in some ways, what we're seeing now is new. We're not even denying the fact that we are being harsh. And I think that's kind of new, and maybe that is generational.
Why do you think? I mean, George H.W. Bush talked about a kinder, gentler nation.
Mhm.
George W. Bush talked about compassionate conservatism. People have all sorts of views about whether they were genuine, especially, but it was an idea.
Yes.
Why didn't that gain a stronger hold in where Republican politics went?
Well, it did have a hold within a faction, but that faction was crushed in the mid, in the 2015 2016 cycle. And I think part of it is, what are the incentives now in politics? What are the incentives in social media? What is going to get you celebrity? What is going to get you clicks? What's going to get you the spots on Fox News? And I think that it was this sort of performative, I am tougher, I am blunt, I'm not going along with all of that. It was a way of separating yourselves from the woke left, to be as harsh and tough as possible, so that if you were the Republican and said, wait, could we just stop? We need to be more caring and more compassionate. That translated as, oh, you're just a rhino, you're just a squish. So this and this is an interesting question to me, because you can really see that there were two paths that Republicans could have taken. And we know the path that they chose. We know now the path they rejected.
And yes, someone just wrote kind of the role of Newt Gingrich. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there's just a lot of Republicans along the way who pushed this other direction.
New major player. Yeah.
New major player, and obviously generations since. But yeah, I think in the 80s and 90s he was really quite pivotal. Is the kind of conservative media now, given these issues, are they pretty much in line with this new vision? Or we talked about some of the issues that are emerging. Are there any kind of tensions in the media at this point, or are they all as unified as the party is around Trumpian MAGA republicanism?
Well, the only one where they've really broken is, and we started off talking about the Jeffrey Epstein case, and then there are obviously differences there, and of course, what's going to also happen is that there's going to be a jockeying for power and influence, so there's going to be different emphasis. You're going to have people who are, they're looking around at the universe, and trust me, the right wing media does not see MSNBC and CNN as their rivals. That's not their competition. So they're carving up the universe. So, like anytime you have like palace intrigues, you're going to have people who are going to be, using sharp elbows and maybe daggers. So you will see that. But I think to your larger point, is there any fundamental pushback? And the answer is no, with one exception. I mean, there is a big division, and there has been really since 2015 between the print right wing journalism. I mean, the tone of, say, National Review or many of the writers or conservative columnists, very, very different than what you see on cable television, or now more importantly, YouTube and things like that. I don't see particularly significant, debate. I mean, maybe there was a little bit of quiver of support for Ron DeSantis, but only because they thought that he could be Trump without Trumpism, or I mean Trumpism without Trump. But no, to your larger question.
Well, that leads to the final thing. There's one division. It's the owner of this big social media platform, who's starting a third party, Elon Musk, of course. And traditionally, we know third parties have limited success. At best, they are spoilers, or put issues on the table, as Ross Perot did in 1992. What do you think of this party that Musk wants to start? Is there more potential because of its resources, or because of the moment in politics, or will this also kind of be crushed by President Trump and the GOP?
Well, okay, there's potential there, and there's obvious potential. I mean, obviously, you have a real appetite, for some third way. You have the world's richest man, so clearly, on paper, it looks like there's potential. I am deeply skeptical for two reasons. Number one, the history of third parties, which never really get traction, as you point out. They generally play the role of spoiler, and number two, I'm skeptical because it's Elon Musk. Elon Musk is actually rather extraordinarily bad at politics. He is tone deaf for politics. And I'm not sure at this point what his staying power is going to be. Is he in this for the long haul, or is this just one of the sort of bleats that we get from him? We just don't know this, but having watched Musk over the last few months, not only is he terrible at this, but he doesn't handle the pressure that well, and that would suggest that there's a real possibility that despite all of the flash and attention that he's getting right now, that he'll tire of this and decide to take his ball and go home. So I just don't know. I think the Ross Perot analogy is extremely interesting. But I also think that our politics have become so much more tribal and more polarized than 1992. Now, if you would have said that back in 1992, you would think, "My God, I mean, we can't get any more partisan and polarized than
Right.
we are right now." I mean, are you kidding
So,
me? And yet, that does seem like a very different world right now. And so, I'm just not sure how that would play out. And also, what is he running on? Is he going to run on, like, I am the genuinely fiscally conservative party? Well, good luck with the 3% of the electorate that is motivated by that.
yeah, I mean, the
I
only
made that
question
number up,
is
by the way.
if he can have an effect in a few congressional elections, which given the narrowness, would have an impact. But I
Right.
think you're right on um, just that, I get that question all the time and I have the same answer. I always just wonder, we're in such a kind of unusual moment, uh, if I'm missing something that can happen
Yeah.
because of the state of politics. But I agree. I think the big issue is the congressional races and just swinging the majority.
Well,
With
or a Senate race too.
Senate.
It is possible that, and again, with his money, is he going to spend that money? Is he going to hire people, and is he going to hire people that then he will listen to? I mean, these are all complete unknowns, and his track record is just not great. Now, if it was some other richest man in the world who was not Elon Musk, I would go, okay, attention needs to be paid about this, but I don't know. I'm just at least for now, for the foreseeable future, I'm a big skeptic.
Well, thank you. First, thank you to everyone listening. And I always say, I hope you'll consider becoming paid subscribers to the Long View, or to the contrary. We appreciate your support. It allows us to do this. And Charlie, thanks for joining. I can't wait till our next conversation. I really
Yeah,
enjoy having these. So thank you.
I do too. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Talk soon. You too.